She does not have a name in the record. That is the first thing you need to understand. She does not have a name. She does not have a voice. And in the legal world of first century Galilee, she barely has a standing. She wakes before dawn. She draws water. She grinds grain. She keeps the house, raises the children, supports the man whose property she technically is from her father's house to her husband's, with no stop in between where she belongs to herself. The ancient Jewish oral law, the tradition passed from rabbi to student for generations, contained a line so blunt, it sounds almost impossible to modern ears. Let no one talk with a woman in the street, not even his own wife. Not even his own wife. She is not to be greeted in public, not to be taught the Torah, not to give testimony in a court. The Jewish historian Josephus would write plainly that a woman could not be a witness because of the levity and boldness of the female sex. That was the world. That was the air everyone breathed, the water everyone drank. The assumption so deep in the bones of that culture that no one thought to question it. And then a teacher from Nazareth opens his mouth. Here's what most people miss. The Gospels record more than 20 times that Jesus spoke directly to a woman. Not about a woman, not at a woman, directly to her, face to face, by name, sometimes as a person. Every single time in that world, it was scandalous. Every single time, something in her life changed. And one of those women, the very last one we will meet today, will become the first herald of the greatest news in human history. We will get to her, but not yet. The first woman we meet is at a well, and the story begins with a scandal before Jesus even says a word. It is midday in Samaria, which is already a problem. Jews did not travel through Samaria if they could avoid it. The animosity between Jews and Samaritans ran 6 centuries deep, a split over blood, theology, and a destroyed temple that neither side had forgiven. A faithful Jewish rabbi would walk miles out of his way to go around Samaria, rather than set one sandal on Samaritan soil. Jesus went straight through. He sits at Jacob's well outside the city of Sychar. He is tired. The disciples have gone into town for food, and a woman comes to draw water alone. At noon, in the heat of the day, women drew water in groups. In the morning, when it was cool, a woman drawing water alone at midday was a woman who could not be around the others. She was avoiding them, or they were avoiding her. John tells us quietly that she had been with 5 husbands, and the man she was living with now was not her husband. She was a social exile doing her chore in the brutal noon sun because it was easier than facing the women who whispered. She arrives at the well. A man is sitting there, a Jewish man. She is a Samaritan. She is a woman. She keeps her head down and reaches for the water jar. And Jesus says, "Will you give me a drink?" She looks up. She cannot help herself. "You're a Jew," she says, "and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" 4 words, and the world was already different. What follows is the longest one-on-one conversation Jesus has with anyone in all 4 Gospels, and it is with this woman, this exile, this 5 times married Samaritan drawing water alone in the heat. He does not avoid difficult questions. He tells her about her own life with a quiet precision that leaves her breathless. And then when she says she knows the Messiah is coming, the one who will explain everything, he looks at her and says 2 words in Greek that carry the full weight of the divine name. Ego eimi, I am he, I am. The name God gave to Moses at the burning bush. The name no Jewish man would dare say aloud. Jesus speaks it for the first time in John's gospel, not to a priest, not to a Pharisee, not to one of the 12. He speaks it to a Samaritan woman with a complicated past, at a well, in a town nobody important had ever visited. The disciples return and find him talking with her. John records their reaction without comment. They were surprised that he was talking with a woman, not that she was Samaritan, that she was a woman. She leaves her water jar behind. She runs back into the city, this woman who had been hiding from the city, and calls out to everyone she can find. Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. And the people of Sychar come out to meet Jesus because of her testimony. The woman with no name in the record had become the first evangelist in Samaria, but it gets stranger. Because the woman at the well was a scandal of category wrong, ethnicity, wrong gender, wrong reputation. What comes next is a scandal written into the body itself. Her name is not recorded either. We know only this: she has been bleeding for 12 years. 12 years. Stop and let that settle. Not 12 weeks, not 12 months. 12 years of waking up every morning to a body that will not stop. 12 years of Leviticus 15, which was not a theological abstraction, but a daily lived reality. Anyone she touched became unclean until evening. Any surface she sat on, any garment she brushed against in the market. The law was designed to protect the community, but for a woman whose bleeding never stopped. The law became a wall between her and every human being she had ever loved. She could not enter the temple. She could not sit at Shabbat with her family. The Talmud records that a man could legally divorce a wife with a chronic bleeding condition because she rendered him unclean every time he came near her. She had spent everything she had on doctors. Mark tells us, with a kind of dry mercy, that she had suffered much under many physicians and had grown worse, not better. She is not just sick. She is untouchable. She has been untouchable for 12 years. There is a good chance she has not felt another human hand on her skin in over a decade. And then she hears that Jesus is in the crowd. She does not ask permission. She cannot if anyone recognizes her. They will push her back, tell her she has no right to be there. So she moves through the crowd low and fast, head down, heart hammering, reaching forward. She does not grab his hand. She does not call out his name. She touches the fringe of his garment, the tzitzit, the prayer tassels at the hem of a Jewish man's robe, and immediately, Mark says, the bleeding stops. She can feel it. In her body, after 12 years, done. She tries to disappear back into the crowd. Pay attention to this. Jesus stops. In the middle of a pressing, moving crowd, he stops and says, "Who touched me?" The disciples look at him like he is losing his mind. There are people pushing from every direction, and he is asking who touched him. But he keeps looking. He keeps turning because he felt something go out from him. Power, faith making contact. She comes forward, trembling. She falls at his feet and tells him everything, the whole story. 12 years of it. The doctors, the money, the isolation, the desperation, the hem of his garment. She tells him everything in front of everyone. And Jesus calls her daughter. That single word, in a world where she was legally a source of contamination, he calls her daughter. And then he says, "Go in shalom," the Hebrew word that English flattens into peace. Shalom does not merely mean the absence of conflict. It means wholeness. completeness, every broken piece put back together, nothing missing, nothing broken. After 12 years of being defined by what was wrong with her body, Jesus speaks wholeness over her, not just healing, but restoration, not just clean, but daughter. She came in hiding. She left with a new name. Now, there is another woman, and almost nobody notices how closely her story mirrors what just happened. She is in a synagogue. She has been bent over for 18 years, her spine curved so severely she cannot straighten, cannot look up, cannot see the sky. She is folded toward the ground, toward the dust, as though the earth itself is pulling her down. She has not seen a horizon in 18 years. She has not come to ask Jesus for anything. There is no record that she pushed through a crowd, no record that she called out to him. She is simply there, bent and waiting the way she always is. And Jesus calls to her from across the room. He does not wait for her to approach him. He does not make her navigate the synagogue floor, bent and slow, while everyone watches. He sees her, and he calls to her. And when she is brought to him, he puts his hands on her, on a woman in a synagogue on the Sabbath, and says, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." And she straightens up. 18 years. And she straightens up and praises God. The synagogue ruler is furious. There are 6 other days for healing, he tells the crowd. Jesus turns on him with a rare heat. "You hypocrite! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey and lead it to water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her? Daughter of Abraham." Scholars of the period note that this phrase appears nowhere else in Jewish literature of the time. Sons of Abraham, yes. The covenant was spoken in male terms, inherited through male lines. But Jesus coins a title for this bent woman that places her inside the covenant on equal terms with every man who ever claimed Abraham as his father. He does not say she is like a daughter of Abraham. He says she is one. She came in bent. She left standing. And she left with a title no woman in that world had ever been given before. Now watch what happens next. Because the women we have met so far came to Jesus with something to question, a desperation, a hand reaching through a crowd. The next woman did not come at all. She was brought. And she was brought not to be helped, but to be used. It is early morning in Jerusalem. Jesus is teaching in the temple courts, and the crowd around him is growing. And then a commotion at the edge of the crowd. Men pushing through, a woman in the middle of them, held by the arms, dragged forward and dropped. That is the word the text uses in the center of the group. "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say?" You can feel the trap closing. If Jesus says stone her, he validates the brutality and loses the crowd. If he says release her, he contradicts Moses and they have their charge. She is not a person to them in this moment. She is a legal problem, a piece on a board. She is crouching in the dust. No one is looking at her face. Jesus bends down and begins to write in the dirt with his finger. No one in 2,000 years of scholarship has agreed on what he wrote. What we know is that the men keep pressing him. And finally, Jesus straightens up and says the most famous sentence he ever spoke to a crowd. "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And he bends down and writes again. They leave, one by one, beginning with the oldest. And when Jesus straightens up, There is no one left in the circle but the woman, still crouching, still in the dust. He says, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She lifts her head, possibly for the first time since this began. "No one, sir." "Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." No lecture, no conditions, no long list of requirements before the grace is given. He speaks forgiveness first, and the call to change comes after, embedded inside the release, not before it, not as the price of it. And here is what sits underneath this whole story like a current under still water. The man is never mentioned again, not by the accusers, not by the text. A woman cannot commit adultery alone. There was a man. The law of Moses, they quoted, required the death of both. But only she was dragged into the temple court that morning. Only she was dropped in the dust. And Jesus, without making a speech about it, simply refuses to play by the rules of a system that condemns women for what it forgives in men. She came in as a weapon against him. She left as a free woman. If you have been sitting in church your whole life and nobody explained what was actually happening in that temple court, stay with us until the end, because the last woman we are going to meet will change everything you thought you knew about how this story ends. Stay with me, because the next woman does not need rescuing. She simply loves him. And what Jesus says in her defense is one of the most remarkable promises he ever made. Her name is Mary. She lives in Bethany, 2 miles from Jerusalem. She has a sister named Martha and a brother named Lazarus. They are among the closest friends Jesus has. John says plainly that he loved them, which is a word John uses carefully. The first time we meet Mary, she is sitting at Jesus' feet while he teaches. You need to know what that means. To sit at a rabbi's feet was a technical term. It meant you were a student, a disciple. When Paul writes in Acts that he was educated at the feet of Gamaliel, he means he was Gamaliel's student, trained in his tradition. Women were not supposed to do that. The rabbis debated whether it was even appropriate to teach a woman the law. Mary sits at his feet, listening, learning. Martha is in the kitchen, which is not a criticism, because someone had to prepare a meal for 13 men who showed up without warning. But she reaches a point where the silence from the other room has gone on too long, and she comes to the doorway exhausted. "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." And Jesus says, "Martha, Martha." The repetition is tenderness, not rebuke. You are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. He will not send her back to the kitchen. The seat at his feet, the seat that by every custom of that world belonged to men, he will not take it from her. He defends her right to be there, out loud, in front of everyone. The second time we meet Mary is 6 days before Passover, the last Passover. They're at dinner in Bethany, and the mood is heavy. Everyone who loves Jesus is afraid of what is coming. Mary comes in with an alabaster jar of pure nard, a perfume worth nearly a full year's wages for a working man. She breaks the jar open and pours it over his feet and wipes it with her hair. The room turns on her immediately. The disciples are indignant because the perfume could have been sold and the money given to the poor, which is not wrong. But there is something else in the indignation. She has entered a room full of men and done something extravagant and uninvited and physically intimate, and it unsettles every category they have. Jesus stops them. "Leave her alone. She has done a beautiful thing to me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. She understood what the disciples had not yet allowed themselves to know. She knew he was going to die. She knew before they admitted it. And she responded with the only currency she had: everything she owned, broken open, poured out, spent completely. And then Jesus says something no one in that room was ready for. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, in memory of her, he promises her a place in the story that could not be taken by poverty or criticism or time. He does not say this about Peter's confession. He says it about a woman who broke open an expensive jar and poured it at his feet. She did what she could, and he made sure the world would never forget it. And this is where it gets remarkable. We have been building to this woman for the entire video. She is not the most famous figure we have met today. She does not have the longest conversation or the most dramatic healing. What she has is a moment, one singular, unrepeatable morning that changes the direction of everything that follows. Her name is Mary Magdalene. She comes from Magdala, a fishing town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Luke tells us she was among a group of women who traveled with Jesus, supporting the ministry from their own resources. She is present at the crucifixion when the disciples have scattered, present at the burial, and she is the first person at the tomb on Sunday morning while it is still dark. Before we get to Sunday morning, you need to understand who she was before Jesus spoke to her. Luke records that from her. 7 demons had gone out. 7 is the number of completeness in the Hebrew imagination. It means not a partial affliction, but a total one. She was not a little broken. She was entirely broken. And then Jesus spoke, and she was entirely remade. She had followed him from Galilee to Jerusalem. Through the arrest, the trial, the cross, she did not leave. John places her at the foot of the cross while the sky went dark. She watched him die. She watched the stone rolled into place. And on the third morning, before the light had fully come, she came back. She finds the stone rolled away. She runs to Peter and John. They come. They look. They see the grave clothes folded, and they go home. John says they did not yet understand. They saw an empty tomb and went home. Mary stays. She is standing outside the tomb, weeping, and she bends down and looks inside, and there are 2 angels sitting where the body had been. "Why are you crying?" they ask. And she says, still weeping, speaking through it, "They have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him." She turns around. There is a man standing in the garden. She thinks he is the gardener. "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." She will carry the body herself if she has to. And the man says one word: Mary. Just her name. The way you say someone's name when you have known them a long time, when the name itself carries everything: the history, the recognition, the love. She turns. The Greek word John uses is strepho, not a slow pivot, but a full body revolution, a spinning around. "Rabboni," she says, "teacher." Now hold this. In the first century, a woman's testimony was not admissible in a Jewish court of law. Josephus states it plainly: women could not be witnesses. The disciples themselves, when the women reported the resurrection, dismissed it as idle talk, leros, the kind of thing you do not take seriously. But Jesus, who had spoken the divine name to a woman at a well, who had called a bleeding exile daughter, who had defended a woman's right to sit at his feet and learn, chose the same way he had always chosen. He appeared first to Mary Magdalene. He spoke her name, and then he gave her a mission. Go to my brothers and tell them I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Go and tell. In a world where her testimony was legally worthless, he made her the first witness of the resurrection. The church fathers would later give her a title, apostle to the apostles, not because a committee decided it, because Jesus said, Mary and sent her. The disciples who ran, the men who went home, they heard the news of the resurrection from a woman. That is not an accident. That is the pattern. One final time, loud enough that 2,000 years later, we are still sitting here talking about it. So we have met 6 women today. A Samaritan exile who became the first evangelist of her city. A woman 12 years untouchable who was called daughter and sent home whole. A woman bent toward the ground for 18 years who was given a covenant title no one before her had ever received. A woman dropped in the dust as a legal weapon who was given back her life in 7 words. A woman who broke open everything she owned at his feet and was promised that the whole world would remember her. And a woman who stayed when everyone else left and heard her name spoken in a garden on the most important morning in history. 20 times, more than 20. And here is what you take from it. First, in a world that treated women as legal minors, people whose testimony did not count, whose education was considered foolishness, whose presence in public was a disruption, Jesus spoke to them as the full human beings they were, not as a concession to culture, deliberately, repeatedly, without apology. He argued theology with the woman at the well longer than he ever argued with the Pharisee. He interrupted his own journey to honor the bleeding woman in front of a crowd. He coined a new covenant title for a woman nobody else had thought worth naming. That is not a man tolerating women. That is a man who sees them completely. Second, every time Jesus spoke to a woman, he gave her back something the world had taken. The Samaritan woman had lost her reputation. He gave her a mission. The bleeding woman had lost her place in the community. He gave her back a name and wholeness. The bent woman had lost 18 years of standing upright. He gave back her spine and her dignity in the same breath. The woman in the dust had lost her freedom. He returned it with no conditions attached. Mary of Bethany had her choice questioned by the room. He defended it permanently in front of everyone. Mary Magdalene had lost the person who had remade her life and heard her name spoken by the one she thought was gone. What had been taken, given back every time. Third, and this is the one that will stay with you, he still speaks. The same Jesus who stopped in the middle of a crowd because one unnamed woman touched the hem of his garment, he still stops. The same Jesus who looked at a woman folded toward the ground and called her from across the room, he still calls. The same Jesus who spoke one word in a garden at dawn and changed everything, he still says names. Your name. You may be in the middle of a crowd today, invisible, convinced there is too much noise and too many people for anyone to notice the small, desperate reach of your hand. You may have been bent low for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to stand upright. You may be like Mary Magdalene, standing at an empty place where something precious used to be, weeping in the gray light, thinking it is over. It is not over. The voice that said, daughter, the voice that said, neither do I condemn you, The voice that spoke a name in a garden at dawn, that voice has not gone quiet, and it has never, not once in all the Gospels, spoken to a woman with anything less than full and complete recognition of who she was. If no one has ever looked at you that way, seen you that way now, you know where to look. And if you have been sitting at the back of the crowd your whole life, convinced the front row was not for you, remember what he said to the woman who pulled up a seat at his feet when the whole room thought she should be somewhere else. She has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her.